Hey everyone, Road to Boston Day 2 is here, and we mentioned this in the first video. We're really going to be talking about, at the beginning of this, some of the training that's really going to impact success on the Boston Marathon course, and it's known for this. We're going to be talking about a specific type of hill training today. In particular, making sure that you're actually training downhill reps, not just your uphill. Everybody thinks that the reason why the Boston Marathon is tough is just because of those hills there at Heartbreak, Ridge, from, the second half on. And yes, obviously the uphill is going to be challenging, but what people don't typically count on, bank on, and train is the downhill nature of the first half, in particular the first 6 to 7 miles, and that eccentric stretching load that is put in particular on your quads is something you really need to practice. Give your body that simulation early on in your training so that it really can deal with that eccentric stretch in the first part so that you're not, dead quads at the end. We're going to be talking about quad preservation throughout this, and this is a good way that you can kind of help, protect them by strengthening those quads with some training here. And this is a great time to do it. It's the beginning of March. You've got like 2-ish months, a little bit less than that. This is a great time to start doing this type of training if you haven't done it before. So I like to have my athletes do this about once a week for about 4 weeks. And then you can go away from it for a couple weeks, and then maybe you have time to do another set of 4. You can do up to 5 of these weeks and go away from them, but see how it makes sense for you. But I would definitely do it for at least 4 consecutive weeks, go away from it. Maybe you can only do a couple more in that second cycle, but this is a really good time to be doing it if you haven't already started it yourself. So I do this as part of what I call my short or mini hill intervals, where you're going really fast uphill and then you're kind of jogging in between. So this is not like marathon pace training on hills. This is not easy run training on hills like rolling hills. This is truly where you're going and you're doing intervals, where you're doing, fast uphill reps of 50 meters, 100 meters, maybe 180 meters if you're at that point where you've built up. And you're not just doing that all then downhill. I recommend doing 2 uphill reps to 1 downhill rep. So maybe you're doing, say, 100 meters uphill. You're gonna do 2 of those with, your jog in between. I usually recommend about 4 minutes on something like that. And then on the next rep, on the 3rd rep after you've done 2, you do 1 downhill, but not quite as fast. So it's kind of like 85% of what you were doing in terms of the intensity going up. So what is that going to do? Again, there's that stretching, that eccentric stretch each time that you're hitting, and then you're still kind of going downhill, that you're getting your body used to doing. And you're probably doing about 3 cycles of that. So you're only doing about 3 downhill fast reps while you're doing it, and then you're doing that for a number of weeks. I wouldn't really do more than 9, so like 2 up, 1 down, so 3 sets of 3. I think that's plenty for this. We're going to be talking about some other training that's going to get some downhill to it, but that kind of fast, load, you're going to want to, use that sparingly, because again, it is potentially, there's damage to the muscles, but if you overdo it, you can also put a lot of, strain on joints. But it's something that you're really going to want, again, for those first couple miles. If you've ever run there in the Boston Marathon, starts in a little town called Hopkinton. It is like downhill at the beginning. It's so hard to stay like on the pace that you're looking for because of the downhill, but then people can just absolutely overwhelm their quadriceps, their just legs in general, because of that. So obviously when we get close to it, we'll talk about pacing yourself going early, but not only practicing the technique of running downhill safely, but putting that demand on your legs, that eccentric stretch on the quadriceps. It's going to help to kind of bulletproof them for later on in the race. So I would do that. I've talked about short hill intervals before. If you have any specific questions about how you might set that up for yourself, definitely ask those in the comments down below. But that's how I would do it. I wouldn't just go out and do like, 8, 9, 10 downhill reps. I would go and mix it in as part of your hill cycle. Typically 2 up, 1 down is a good sort of balancing act, because you're putting a demand on your legs from that uphill, and then you're like, oh, downhill, and it has to kind of like learn and be able to be stronger in that sort of situation. So that's the first type of hill training we're really focusing on here, those downhill faster reps. And again, it's not as fast as you're going uphill. Please be cautious when you're doing this. Again, about 80 to 85% of the intensity that you're going down. So that way you can really help your body develop a callus essentially for these downhill reps. So we're going to come back for day 3. We're going to be talking about a different type of hill in terms of training. And again, if you have any questions on how you could set up these downhill fast reps for yourself, please ask those in the comments down below.